Picture this. You're sitting in your doctor's office. You are doing everything right. I mean, you've completely given up sugar.
Right, you're putting in all the hard work.
Exactly. You heroically skip the bread basket every time you go out to eat. You haven't looked at a dessert in what feels like forever.
You're doing it day in and day out.
Yeah. But then the doctor slides your blood test results across the desk, and right there, staring back at you, is a shockingly high blood sugar reading.
Oh man, it's an incredibly isolating moment. You feel like you've been doing everything perfectly, and the data is essentially calling you a liar.
It really is. Your doctor might even give you that look. You know the look. That slight skeptical raise of the eyebrow that silently says, come on, you must be secretly cheating on your diet.
Which is so frustrating because you aren't.
Right, you aren't.
Yeah.
So you are left sitting there completely bewildered, wondering what on earth is happening inside your own body.
It feels like a betrayal by your own biology, honestly. Because we're all taught a very fundamental yet deeply flawed equation, which is sugar in equals sugar out.
Right, the classic calories and sugar model.
Exactly. The assumption is, if you consume sugar, your blood sugar rises, and if you restrict it, it falls. But the human body operates on a physiological level that is vastly more sophisticated than that simple math.
So when that equation fails, it means we need to stop looking at the plate and start looking at the internal machinery.
Precisely.
And that is exactly our mission today. We are looking at some really fascinating biological detective work from a video by Dr. Eric Berg to figure out exactly why this happens.
It's a really eye-opening source to dig into.
It really is. We are going to solve this biological mystery in this deep dive. We'll unpack the real cellular mechanisms behind these baffling test results and provide a clear, actionable roadmap out of all this confusion. Okay, let's unpack this, because the central plot twist here is that what you eat is literally only half the story.
Yeah, to understand the other half of that story, we have to look at an organ that most people would never intuitively link to their blood sugar issues.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. You see, if you're sitting in that doctor's office feeling frustrated, your frustration is completely validated. You aren't cheating on your diet, but you are missing a crucial piece of the physiological puzzle, which is internal glucose production.
Which leads to, the most logical question: if the sugar in my blood isn't coming from the food I am eating, where on earth is my body getting it?
It is manufacturing it. And the primary manufacturing plant is your liver.
The liver. Okay, now, you probably already know the liver acts as the body's primary filter. We're taught that it has about 500 different functions, right?
Yeah, a massive amount of jobs.
Mostly centered around acting as this massive detoxification center for the blood.
It is a phenomenal filter, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it has a secret identity that gets entirely overlooked. It's also a literal sugar factory.
A sugar factory, wow.
Yeah, and to understand why it acts this way, we have to look at the absolute biological baseline of the human body. Because even if you exist on a strict, zero sugar, heavily ketogenic diet,
like basically zero carbs.
Right. Even then, there is a small, non-negotiable percentage of your body's tissues that absolutely depend on glucose to function.
We're talking about specific vital organs that just can't run on alternative fuels like ketones.
Exactly. Specifically, certain parts of the brain and the medulla of the kidneys, along with red blood cells. They lack the mitochondria to process fat for fuel, so they literally cannot run without sugar.
Oh, wow. So they need it to survive.
They do. Because of this, biology has a built-in contingency plan called gluconeogenesis. Translated, that means the creation of new sugar.
Creation of new sugar, got it.
Yeah, so if you don't eat sugar, your liver simply sparks up the factory machinery and makes it from scratch.
It's like the liver is a hyper-vigilant backup generator.
Yeah.
You cut the external power supply, the carbohydrates from your diet, and the generator automatically kicks on to keep the lights on in the brain and the kidneys.
That is a great way to look at it. And the fascinating part of this gluconeogenesis process is that the liver will just scavenge whatever is lying around to make this fuel.
Like what? What does it use?
Well, it utilizes lipolysis to break down fat. That could be from the calories you eat or the fat stored on your own body. And it will even break down dietary protein, basically reconfiguring those carbon bonds to ship out pure glucose.
That's an incredibly resourceful mechanism of survival. It guarantees that your brain and kidneys never starve, regardless of your external environment or diet.
It really is brilliant.
But wait, hold on. Evolutionary biology is usually flawlessly efficient, right? We are talking about millions of years of survival optimization.
Sure.
So if the body built this incredible backup generator just to keep the brain running, why would it accidentally flood its own engine? I mean, if the liver is supposedly just providing baseline fuel, why is it overproducing sugar to the point that my blood test comes back with a dangerously high reading?
That's the big question.
Because overproducing to the point of toxicity seems completely counterintuitive for a survival mechanism.
And that right there is the crux of the mystery.
Yeah.
That is the exact mechanism that makes you feel crazy when you get those results.
Yeah.
Your liver isn't just making a baseline amount of fuel.
It's doing way more than that.
Right. It is overproducing in a massive way. It is a factory that has completely lost its regulatory control. And to understand why a biological factory is overproducing, we have to figure out who is in charge of the machinery.
Or, more accurately, who is in charge of shutting the machinery off.
Exactly. Every well-functioning factory needs an off switch. In the human body, the off switch for this liver sugar factory is a hormone you are already very familiar with, which is insulin.
Insulin, of course.
Yeah. When there is enough insulin in the blood, it acts as a signaling molecule. It binds to the liver and says, we have enough sugar in the system, shut down gluconeogenesis.
And if it doesn't get that signal?
If that signal isn't received, the liver just assumes you are starving and it keeps pumping out sugar.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because there is a massive glaring contradiction in the underlying logic here.
Oh, that was so.
Well, we've established that the scenario is someone eating 0 sugar and 0 carbs, right? And you already know that eating carbohydrates is the primary trigger for insulin release. So, if you aren't eating carbs, you aren't stimulating insulin. Your insulin level should naturally be low.
That makes sense.
So, by that biological logic, doesn't the body just run rampant making sugar? It sounds like the act of going low carb is actually the thing causing the high blood sugar.
What's fascinating here is how easily that logic can be misinterpreted if we only look at a snapshot in time.
Okay, clarify that for me.
The problem isn't that low insulin from your current healthy diet is causing the liver to overproduce. The real problem is a deeply abused system resulting from a historical legacy of diet.
Oh, so it's about the past, not the present.
Exactly. We're talking about the cellular damage done over the past decades, not just the past few weeks of eating clean.
We need to dive into that cellular damage because I feel like that changes the entire paradigm of how we view this issue.
It really does. Let's look at what happens when someone consumes a standard, high-carbohydrate, highly processed diet for a long period of time, say 10 to 20 years.
Which is, let's be honest, most people.
Unfortunately, yes. Every time they eat, they are bombarding their cells with massive amounts of insulin to deal with the incoming glucose.
Just constant waves of it.
Right. And over those decades of constant overstimulation, the cells initiate a defense mechanism. To protect themselves from nutrient toxicity, the cells physically pull their insulin receptors inside.
Wait, they hide them?
They literally downregulate the receptors. The cells go completely deaf to the hormone.
So imagine your cells are an exclusive nightclub, and insulin is the bouncer trying to aggressively shove more and more sugar inside.
I love that analogy.
And eventually the club is so dangerously overpacked that management physically boards up the doors. The bouncer is outside yelling, but no one is getting in. The cell intentionally ignores the insulin to protect itself.
That is a perfect analogy. And that physical boarding up of the doors, that cellular deafness, is what we call insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance.
Got it. So, because the liver cells are resistant to the insulin signal, it literally thinks there is no off switch. The insulin is present in the blood, but the signal just isn't connected.
So the liver is flying blind.
Exactly. The liver assumes the blood is empty and thinks, I need to make more sugar to save the brain, even when the bloodstream is already heavily saturated.
Wow, that is an incredible and honestly somewhat terrifying illusion of health that can go on for decades.
It really is an illusion.
And here is the really scary part of this illusion. For 10 to 20 years, you could be eating a highly processed diet. You go to your annual physical, your doctor checks your fasting blood sugar, and it comes back totally normal.
And you walk out thinking you're in perfect metabolic health.
Exactly, but you're not.
No, because for all those years, your pancreas is just pumping out more and more insulin to overcome that cellular deafness. The insulin is acting like a frantic janitor.
A frantic janitor, I like that.
Yeah, you eat the sugar, and massive waves of insulin rush in, sweep it up, and aggressively force it out of the blood and into the fat cells.
So the doctor measures the blood sugar, sees a perfectly clean hallway, and says, you are fine.
Right, but they never test the janitor. They never measure how high your fasting insulin levels are or how hard your pancreas is working just to keep that hallway looking normal.
Right, the whole system is redlining just to maintain the illusion of balance.
Exactly. And eventually, the janitor just collapses.
So the pancreas just burns out.
Yes. After decades of this overproduction, the pancreas begins to burn out. The insulin resistance is so severe that the hormone simply stops working efficiently.
And then what happens?
You actually become functionally deficient in insulin. The off switch completely shatters. And that is when the liver factory goes into endless overtime, pumping pure glucose into your blood, even if you stopped eating carbohydrates 6 months ago.
Which leads to a staggering statistic from Dr. Berg's deep dive that perfectly illustrates just how internally driven this problem is.
Oh, this number always shocks people.
80%. In a diagnosed diabetic, 80% of the sugar circulating in their blood is actually coming directly from the liver, not from their diet.
It is a staggering number.
It completely reframes diabetes and high blood sugar from a dietary intake problem to an internal production problem.
It really shifts the entire perspective.
Which completely explains the mechanism behind medications like metformin. I mean, metformin doesn't just block sugar absorption. It specifically targets the liver to suppress gluconeogenesis and sensitize the body to insulin.
It does, but we must be incredibly careful here regarding the pharmaceutical approach.
Oh, so?
Well, medications like metformin might address the liver's overproduction, but they have a major limitation. They only manage the downstream symptom.
So they aren't fixing the root cause.
Exactly. They alter the pathway, but they do not fix the underlying cause of the cellular insulin resistance. The off switch is still fundamentally broken at the receptor level.
Okay, so a broken off switch from decades of carbohydrate abuse is trigger number one. But let's look at another scenario that causes immense confusion.
Let's hear.
Let's say your diet hasn't been terrible for decades, or you've been eating remarkably clean for a long time. What if you wake up in the morning, having fasted all night, you haven't eaten a single calorie since dinner the night before, and your fasting blood sugar is just sky high?
That brings us to the second major trigger that forces the liver to dump sugar. And it has absolutely nothing to do with food.
Nothing to do with food.
Nothing. It is stress.
Stress. It seems like every physiological breakdown eventually tracks back to stress.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But we need to be specific about the mechanics here. It all comes back to the hormone cortisol.
Okay, cortisol.
When you experience stress, whether that is psychological stress from a job or physical stress from an illness, your body activates cortisol. And cortisol's primary evolutionary function is to release instant energy into the bloodstream for a fight or flight response.
So it's pure survival fuel. If you are running from a predator, you need immediate glucose available for your muscles, not an hour from now.
Exactly, you need it right then. And to understand just how powerful cortisol is at forcing the liver to make sugar, look at the extreme side effects of medications like prednisone.
Ooh, prednisone, that's a strong one.
It is essentially a potent synthetic cortisol. When a patient takes a high dose of prednisone for inflammation, it can jack up their blood sugar so severely and so rapidly that it can actually induce a state of clinical diabetes.
Wait, seriously? It can cause diabetes on its own?
Yes, it chemically sources the liver to release an absolute torrent of sugar, completely independent of whatever the patient is eating.
Wow, that really puts the sheer metabolic power of cortisol into perspective. But how does that explain waking up at dawn with high blood sugar? I mean, I'm asleep in my bed. I'm not fighting a tiger, and I'm not taking synthetic hormones.
You are experiencing a well-documented biological event known as the dawn phenomena.
The dawn phenomena.
Yes, every single morning, right around 8 a.m., the human body experiences its largest natural circadian spike of cortisol. Yes. It is an evolutionary mechanism designed to pull you out of deep sleep, raise your blood pressure slightly, and provide the energy to get you moving for the day.
So it's basically an internal hormonal alarm clock.
Precisely. Now, in a metabolically healthy person, that cortisol spike prompts a small, manageable release of glucose from the liver, which is quickly utilized.
Makes sense.
But if you take that natural morning cortisol spike and you combine it with underlying hidden insulin resistance in the liver,
oh no.
Yeah, it is a recipe for a massive metabolic misfire. The cortisol binds to the liver receptors, demanding fuel for the day. But because the insulin off switch is broken, the brakes are effectively cut.
So the liver just dumps it all.
Exactly. The liver goes into absolute overdrive, flooding the bloodstream with an excessive amount of sugar before you've even opened your eyes.
The biological detective work here is just fascinating, but you shouldn't panic if you see this happening, because if you just go for a brisk morning walk, your skeletal muscles will quickly soak up and burn off that excess energy.
That's very true. Movement helps immensely.
However, and this is a massive red flag, if you are experiencing the dawn phenomenon, it means your liver's insulin resistance is already out of control.
It does.
And you likely had no idea because, again, nobody ever checked your fasting insulin levels during those 2 decades of the illusion of health.
It is a profound wake-up call, literally and figuratively. Your body is forcefully communicating that your internal environment is highly dysregulated, even if your current external diet is pristine.
So what does this all mean? We've solved the core mystery. We know you aren't crazy and you aren't failing your diet.
Right.
The liver is malfunctioning. It's acting as a rogue sugar factory driven by hidden insulin resistance and amplified by cortisol.
So true.
So the crucial question now is, how do we actually test for this hidden machinery problem? And much more importantly, what is the roadmap to fixing it?
Let's begin with the diagnostics, because the specific test you request from your doctor dictates everything.
What's the usual test they run?
Standard protocol is to run an A1C test, which provides a 3-month average of your blood glucose levels.
Okay, the A1C.
Now, a rogue liver making excess sugar will definitely tick your A1C upward. But it might not look disastrous, especially if your sugar is only spiking in the morning and your body manages to clear it by the afternoon.
Right, the A1C might just look borderline concerning, but it only measures the mess in the hallway, not the broken machinery causing it.
Exactly. The true gold standard, the test you need to explicitly advocate for in that doctor's office, is a fasting insulin test.
A fasting insulin test?
Yes. This measures the janitor. It tells us exactly how hard your pancreas is working to overcome the cellular deafness.
And the target numbers for this are very specific, right?
Very specific.
If you get a fasting insulin test, your ideal metabolically healthy range is between 2 and 6.
That's the sweet spot.
If your score creeps up to a 7 or an 8, you are in the risk zone. The receptors are starting to downregulate.
You need to pay attention there.
But if your score comes back at 12 or above, that indicates strong, significant insulin resistance. The cellular doors are boarded up and the off switch is functionally broken.
Exactly. And once you possess that data, you have to initiate a physiological repair process.
So what's the first step?
The roadmap for fixing this begins with action step 1, which is adopting a deep, uncompromising low-carb diet.
And we have to be exceptionally precise here because low carb is a heavily marketed buzzword.
It really is.
It's not just about ditching table sugar or skipping dessert. You have to aggressively eliminate modern starches.
You really do.
You have to start reading ingredient labels ruthlessly because the food industry hides highly glycemic starches in almost everything. Specifically, ingredients like modified food starch and maltodextrin.
Oh, maltodextrin is particularly insidious.
It really is. Even though maltodextrin isn't technically classified as a sugar on a nutrition label, it's a polysaccharide. Its glycemic index is astronomically high.
It's shocking how high it is.
Right. I mean, table sugar has a glycemic index of around 65. Maltodextrin can hit up to 130. Yeah. The enzymes in your gut cleave those glucose chains instantly, meaning it hits your bloodstream and spikes your insulin faster and more violently than eating straight table sugar.
Which brings us to action step 2. And this is the behavioral shift that modern society finds the most difficult to accept.
What's that?
The absolute elimination of snacking.
Oh man, that sounds completely counterintuitive though.
I know, but hear me out.
I mean, if I eat a decent lunch and 90 minutes later my stomach is genuinely rumbling and I feel that classic drop in energy, you're telling me I'm not actually hungry. How does it make sense to ignore a direct biological signal?
Because what you're experiencing 90 minutes later isn't a genuine biological requirement for calories. It is what Dr. Berg identifies as dopamine hunger.
Dopamine hunger?
Yes. It is a neurological and hormonal addiction response to ultra-processed foods.
Okay, let's break down the mechanism of that, because the Chinese restaurant example illustrates this perfectly.
It's the classic example.
You eat a massive meal loaded with hidden sugars, refined white rice, and high amounts of MSG monosodium glutamate. You eat until you are physically stuffed.
Totally cool.
Yet an hour and a half later, your stomach feels hollow and you think, I need to eat again, but you aren't starving. MSG is an excitotoxin.
Right. It chemically overstimulates the receptors.
Exactly. It overstimulates the receptors on your taste buds and in your brain, creating a massive artificial dopamine surge.
And biological systems demand homeostasis. When that massive artificial dopamine hit vanishes rapidly, it leaves a neurochemical void that the brain misinterprets as an acute caloric need.
So it tricks you.
It mimics a starvation response perfectly. The food is bioengineered to design you to crave more of it.
That is the insidious nature of modern processed food, and the physiological fix for this is pretty strict, isn't it?
It is. You must transition to eating only 2 nutrient-dense meals a day.
Just 2?
Yes. For instance, consume your first meal at 12:00 p.m. and your second at 6:00 p.m. Skip breakfast entirely to extend the overnight fast.
And what about between those meals?
Absolutely no snacking in between. None. When you finish your meal at 6:00 p.m., the kitchen is closed until noon the next day.
Wow. That's a big shift.
The historical context here is vital for understanding why this is necessary. Think about the modern grocery store.
Okay.
You walk in, and there are entire massive aisles dedicated solely to snack foods. Aisles for chips, crackers, cookies, and heavily processed protein bars.
Right, they're everywhere.
But if you look back before the 1970s, snacking culturally just wasn't a concept. It was actively frowned upon because it would ruin your appetite for a real meal.
It's crazy how much has changed. We went from 3 square meals a day to this bizarre cultural shift of eating 5 or 6 times a day under the guise of keeping our metabolism up.
Which is entirely wrong for insulin.
Right, because biologically, every single time you put a snack in your mouth, even a highly marketed healthy snack, you are triggering an insulin release.
You are constantly knocking on the door of the cell.
Exactly, preventing the off switch from ever getting a moment of rest.
Which is why stopping the snacking is mandatory if you want to heal the receptors. You have to give the cellular environment a sustained period of hormonal silence, so the cells feel safe enough to upregulate their receptors and open the doors again.
And speaking of creating a safe internal environment, action step 3 is radical stress reduction.
This is huge.
Because, as we established, stress equals cortisol, and cortisol equals a massive liver sugar dump.
Exactly. Dialing in your macronutrients is only half the protocol. Lowering systemic stress is a biological necessity to shut down the gluconeogenesis pathway.
So what does that practically look like?
This means rigidly prioritizing a good night's sleep to regulate morning cortisol and incorporating regular low-intensity walking.
Walking is so underrated.
It really is. It physically clears out excess circulating glucose while lowering the sympathetic nervous system's fight-or-flight response.
And changing your literal environment too, right? Getting out of the office is critical.
Oh, completely.
Stepping away from artificial indoor fluorescent lights and getting out into actual sunlight has a profound, measurable effect on down-regulating nervous system stress.
It's about fundamentally changing the inputs your body is receiving, both nutritionally and environmentally.
Right.
Now, we do need to manage expectations here. Healing this system is absolutely possible, but it is not an overnight fix.
Right. You cannot undo 20 years of aggressive insulin resistance with 3 days of a ketogenic diet and 1 10-minute walk in the sun.
Exactly. To heal those cellular receptors, you have to entirely stop the triggering of insulin for a sustained, unbroken period.
You really have to give it time.
You do. You have to lower the baseline insulin levels long enough for those deaf cells to slowly regain their hearing, pull the receptors back to the surface, and normalize the signaling pathway.
And the timeline for that cellular repair varies wildly.
It does.
Depending on how much metabolic damage has been accumulated over the decades, especially if your fasting insulin is currently sitting above a 12 tap, this reset takes time.
It's a process.
For some people, it takes several weeks. For others with more severe resistance, it takes months. And for some, it could take well over a year of strict, unwavering adherence before the liver's factory off switch works properly again.
It takes time, but the biology will repair itself.
That's the hopeful part.
It requires immense patience and discipline. But the human body has a profound capacity for regeneration if you stop poisoning the pathways and provide the right environment.
So to synthesize all of this, the biggest breakthrough realization for you, the listener, is this.
Yeah, let's sum it up.
You are not crazy. You are not failing your diet. If you are experiencing high blood sugar on a strict zero sugar diet, you have a liver problem.
A very specific liver problem.
Right. It is being driven by a broken off switch caused by years of hidden insulin resistance and compounded by the evolutionary survival mechanism of cortisol.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's clear that knowledge is only truly valuable when it is applied to your daily life.
Completely agree.
You are no longer operating in the dark. Armed with this mechanistic understanding, you can walk into your doctor's office, respectfully bypass the generic dietary advice, and ask for the exact diagnostic tool you need, the fasting insulin test.
That is so empowering.
It is, and you can take back control of your metabolic environment by intentionally ignoring the engineered dopamine hits of the snack aisles.
You absolutely have the knowledge to rebuild the switch. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final thought to really mull over.
I love this part.
We learned today that the liver has 500 different functions, primarily acting as a vital, relentless filter to detoxify your blood from all the chemicals, pollutants, and metabolic waste of the modern world.
It's a busy organ.
But we also learned that decades of modern carbohydrates and high stress force the liver to abandon its normal duties and mutate into a full-time, out-of-control sugar factory, which makes you wonder, if your liver is spending all its precious cellular energy and resources just trying to manage a broken sugar switch and constant cortisol spikes, what exactly is happening to the other 499 vital detoxification functions it's supposed to be doing to keep you alive and healthy?
That is a profound question and a sobering reminder of how interconnected our biology truly is.
Something to think about the next time you feel the urge to reach for a late-night snack. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.